Actually, if anything, I would call myself a storyteller by profession. I graduated from the Amsterdam Film School and I went to make documentaries for about 15 years all over the world. And then I decided to change my profession and I became a law enforcement officer. And while working at the police force, I earned my PhD. And I earned my PhD because I was bringing two different domains together, film and police work. And the central theme behind my thesis was, can we use scenarios as they are used in the film industry to better anticipate crime in general and terrorism in particular? And it worked. It worked both in practice as scientifically. And the police were very interested in the results, but unfortunately were unable to process this in a software application. So then I again decided to change my profession. And I quit from the police force and I started my own company. It's called Pandora Intelligence. I started it 1.5 years ago, and only recently we've been recognized as the most innovative, disruptive and fast-growing company of the Netherlands. One of the most, I have to say. Anyway, I'm going to tell you, going to explain to you what the theme behind my thesis is. It's a bit of theory, and then I'm going to give you an explanation in which we use the system to anticipate terrorism. Now, this is a picture that I took while I was working at the police force. This is the output of an investigation. It's a lot of hush-hush, it's a lot of hard work, but eventually it's a lot of paper. In fact, I counted it out. If you were to do this investigation by yourself, it would take you the better part of your working life. That's how much knowledge is inside these cabinet files. If you want to be a learning organization, and the police wants to be a learning organization, this should give you a proper headache. Because what do we do with this? We lock it away for obvious reasons, and we keep it there. So it's very inaccessible. It might be digital, but still, it's inaccessible. And that is a setback if you want to be a learning organization. Now, where I come from, there are different rules. And these are the rules of the narrative. And if there's one takeaway lesson I would like to offer you today, that would be never underestimate the power of a narrative. And I'd like to introduce a very dramatic pause there. Never underestimate the power of a narrative. Narratives are so important. We relate knowledge from generation to generation by relating stories to our children, conveying very complex ideas about morality. And tonight, if we watch the news, the whole complex world is brought to us quite literally in the form of a narrative. And we even wage wars because of the fact that there is a narrative that there are weapons of mass destruction somewhere. So what I did, I went back to look at these cabinet files, and I tried to see where the narrative is in these cabinet files, in these loads of paper. And I found out that from the perspective of a storyteller, this is all irrelevant information. You can lock it away, you can keep it in a vault, you can even destroy it after 5 years, because we're obliged to do so by law. The narrative is in less than 2 ordners. This was the birth of my idea to what would happen if we were able to condense all these cabinet files into stories. And you can make these stories GDPR-proof. And these investigations are run by the Dutch National Police, on average, any given day, 120, 150 investigations, any given day. So what would happen if we were able to condense these knowledge sources into stories and structurize all these stories on the same way so we can compare and contrast them? That was the basic idea behind my thesis. Now, this is a lesson from the film school I would like to offer you. Every single story can be told by a limited number of components. Forget the who, what, where, when, and how. They were invented in 1904, and the world has become a little bit more complex. These are the components by which every single story can be told. It doesn't matter if it takes place in ancient Greece or ancient or modern day Amsterdam, every single story can be told by these components. Now, most of them are self-explanatory, except maybe for red herring and symbolism. Red herring, basically, it's a term that was coined by Alfred Hitchcock. It's a false clue. And in our world is full of false clues. And symbolism, I've given those two a circle as opposed to the hexagon of the others, because the other components you cannot mix up. There's no way you can mix up arena with primary objective or means with contact. However, red herring, false clue, and symbolism can affect other components. So it's a little bit more complex than here. For instance, think about the Twin Towers. The arena had a highly symbolic value, or the bars in the attacks in Paris. I would feel comfortable arguing that if you take away symbolism in a terrorist attack, it's not terrorism anymore. Terrorism and symbolism are intricately connected. It becomes mass murder or killing spree or what have you, but not terrorism. So these are very important components. Now, basically, it's a lot more complex, I have to say. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to earn my PhD on this. You can regard these as the top-level domains. And underneath are many, many layers of subcomponents. And all these subcomponents, there are more than 200,000 that combined make up a story, are intricately connected. And it becomes what in data science is called a graph. A graph consists of nodes and edges. But basically, if you keep it simple, then we have all these components, you put them in a timeline, and you have a graphic representation of the next terrorist attack, the next credit card fraud, the next synthetic drug procurement. This is the basic outline of the next incident that is about to happen. And we all know that there is this complex taxonomy lying underneath. Now, what I would be interested in is a data set consisting of many, many different incidents, many terrorist incidents, many assassinations, all the incidents that you can combine, as long as they have the same structure as all the other narratives. Then we can combine, compare and contrast different incidents. What we're using with the police force, we're running a test now, and they have client data. Client data on terrorism, fortunately, we don't have that many terrorist incidents in the Netherlands. So that's a very low resolution, a low volume, but a high resolution data set. So not many incidents, but the incidents that are in the police data set have a high resolution, because if we apprehend somebody and he has a weapon, then we know the serial number for the weapon. So that's a very high resolution. But because of the fact that it's such a relatively low volume, it's very hard to apply artificial intelligence on it. So what we did on terrorism is we created an open source data set. And at this point in time, I'm quite proud to say that we have the largest data set on terrorism in the world. Over 200,000 incidents from open sources. And if we combine those, we get a data set on which you can apply artificial intelligence. But then I was earning my PhD and somebody said to me, interesting, but we all know that terrorists in general are far more creative than the people working in the police force. So how can we get creativity in the model? And it took me a night and a bottle of wine, and we came up with a creative data set. This is a data set of incidents that never happened, but were thought of by filmmakers, theater writers, novelists. The Homeland is in the creative data set. The complete works of Frederick Forsyth are in the creative data set. So now it becomes interesting. And on top of that, we add artificial intelligence. And without going into it too deep, the artificial intelligence tools that we use, they detect knowledge rules from all these data sets. And then they start to create new incidents based on the knowledge rules that they find. Now, basically, that's the theoretic part. That's the way it works. Now, you might ask, how can we use this in practice? And for that, I have a not entirely true story, Nico. watch my eyes, going... This is an incident that actually, I have to say that's not entirely a true story because it's a true story. But I'm not able to speak about it unless I change some identifiable parts of it. So what's the story? The story is that in the eastern part of the Netherlands, I was working at the police force, it was 2017 I think, an explosion was heard. And neighbors went to watch, there was no thunderstorm, nothing like that, and they found 2 severely damaged trees. The police went to look and they found this, a peculiar piece of metal, copper to be precise. Now this is the moment when I would like to show you a little bit of the model that we're now working with. Now what we have only is a working scenario which contains copper and explosive. So what I do, I just enter copper and explosive in the model, right? And the model returns all the incidents that combine copper and explosive. And it distinguishes red nodes from blue nodes. Red nodes it deems more important than blue nodes. So basically what you want to do now as an analyst, you want to ask the model, give me all the relation between the red nodes. Because the red nodes, the red incidents, the red stories, the red terrorist incidents have a combination. And basically the model starts subtracting all the incidents that are not relevant. And it gives you the relationship between all the incidents in the data set that combine copper and explosive. Now next, what you would like to do, at least I would if I were the investigative officer here, I would like to see the relationship between all the incidents. And what we've done here, this is normally what you don't see in the, we're now looking under the hood of the model. But what you see here is we've plotted all the red nodes, so all the stories, very shortly on a XYZ axis. And now we see that there are lines of similarities other than copper and explosive because that's what binds all these stories. Now, the reason why I'm still happy that I resigned from the police force and actually why I sleep only 4 hours a night is because this is so cool. It's the first time in human history that we're able to combine completely different stories. We're now able to calculate to what extent the Charlie Hebdo attacks matches the, let's say, the dogs of war of Frederick Forsyth. We were not able to do so before because we didn't have the computing power of computers, we didn't have the memory of computers, and we didn't have this narrative approach. And that's what really makes me happy. Okay, but let's go back to the original idea. So we have a very simple working scenario on the bottom. And we have this complete set of horrors. That's why it's called Pandora. I was giving a presentation the other night at the EU. And then somebody came up to me and said, I went to school with a girl named Pandora. And then it was quite forbidden. And then he said, but I never got to see the box. Anyway, so now we have a working scenario. And we know a few things. We know the exact arena, which I now refer to as in the eastern part of the Netherlands in the woods. And we have a modus operandi. We have this copper and explosive, right? And by comparing all the incidents that we did, we found out that this could well be a Krakatoa. And a Krakatoa is commonly known in the trade. It's an explosively formed penetrator. It's a homemade explosive. It's a canister filled with explosive and welded shut with a convex copper plate. Now what happens, the explosive is ignited and it sends off the copper plate as an enormous bullet. This is something that every single explosive expert could have told us. However, what none of the explosive experts could have told us is that a Krakatoa in the data set is always made in pairs, or 3 or 4 or 5. And the first one is always used in a test. And the second one is used for the actual execution of the attack, and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And what none of the explosive experts could have told us is that there is a time frame between the testing of the first Krakatoa and the actual execution of an attack that was between 4 and 11 days. So now we had a time frame on our hands. That's a knowledge rule, by the way. It's a knowledge rule that the system obtains automatically. Another knowledge rules is that a system like this, so Krakatoa, has never been used against a person directly, never. In retrospect, it makes sense, because this copper plate has a very small trajectory, but when it hits armored plating or steel, it disintegrates that armored plating and it becomes far more lethal. And this is where you see the results. This was an interesting case. It was the first time that we found a Krakatoa in Western Europe, and it's the assassination of Alfred Herrhausen, German bank director in 1989. He was assassinated by RAF. But basically, without going too much into the data science part of it, what the system can do, and this is only open sources, so there's no police information attacked, the system connects different scenarios. And although maybe scenario 1 and the ultimate scenario are not connected directly, they are connected via intermediate scenarios. And that is what the model can do. And that's what the model can do many, many, many times faster and more efficient than any human would be able to do. In open sources, although the system consulted many incidents. And this is an incident that became very interesting. This is an incident that happened in Syria in which a bomb factory was dismantled. And so there was no attack. But with this incident, a violent jihadist from Dutch descent was connected in open sources. In open sources, we found the nom de guerre, how would you pronounce that, the war name of this specific person, so not his real name. In open sources, we found that he claimed to be an explosive expert that was trained by Daesh, by IS. And in open sources, we found that he returned to the Netherlands 2 weeks prior to the explosion in the eastern part of the Netherlands. So this was a very interesting situation, and we were very interested in this person. I went to my public prosecution service and I said, okay, this for me is a very interesting person. And he said, that's a bit of a problem, because what's the starting information? We can hardly say in court that, Your Honor, we found this person by data science in open sources. So we had to make a little trick, and we did. And eventually, we named this person as a person of interest. And we went into the police forces, and we found his historic telephone records. And based on the historic telephone records, we could pinpoint him on exactly the location and exactly the time when the explosion occurred, because he received or sent an SMS. Now, he's arrested. And when he was arrested, he was 24 years old. To me, the essence of the added value of a system like this lies in the fact that there is no way that he can know that he's retraceable with data science back to an incident that occurred in 1989 when he wasn't even born yet. Basically, this is what we do with Pandora Intelligence. This is the model that we have, and this is what we would like to tell you about. Thank you very much.